Hello everyone and welcome to Heather's Home Kitchen. I'm registered dietitian Heather Klug with the Karen Yontz Women's Cardiac Awareness Center. So it's March and that means it's National Nutrition Month. And for 2022, the theme is Celebrate a World of Flavors. So what I thought I would do for you guys is each week in March, I would pick a different cuisine from around the world and prepare a dish for you. So week 1 is Mediterranean. And that means I'm gonna make a Mediterranean dish. We're gonna do chicken piccata tonight. So this is a real quick and easy recipe that you can make on a weeknight, or it's fancy enough where you could make that if you have company coming over. So the first thing we're gonna do when we make chicken piccata, you're gonna buy chicken breasts. So I bought a pound of chicken breasts. I've prepared a couple of them ahead of time, but we're gonna pound them, okay? We need to pound them with a mallet because we want it kind of thin. So that means it's gonna cook a little bit faster and it's gonna cook evenly. Sometimes you maybe even have to take the chicken breasts and maybe cut them in half before you pound them. You can also do it afterwards. It doesn't matter which way you do it. But that way you're gonna get more like accurate portion sizes for when you go to eat it. So to pound chicken breast, what I did is I have pieces of saran wrap. I laid one of them down and then I put the chicken breast on top and then another layer of saran wrap over it. I've also seen people do it in Ziploc bags too, whichever way you'd like to do it. And then you get out one of these lovely meat mallets. If you don't have one of these, you can also use a cup. You can use a rolling pin, whatever you can use to kind of bang it, okay? This is a great thing to do if you need to relieve any stress, and you'll see what I mean in just a minute. Now, I've already done one of them, if you can kind of see this here. These were the same size, just so you know to start off with, or pretty close. So again, we're gonna pound it down to close to about a ½ inch. And when you pound, you wanna start kind of in the middle and sort of work your way out. Again, this is a wonderful stress reliever. Kids are bothering you, spouse, work, whatever stress you have. It's a great way to get your stress out. Okay, and then you can always kind of peek in there if I can get my saran wrap up correctly here. Saran wrap is one of my nemesis. Okay, that looks pretty good though. Okay. So I think we're pretty good. I think I'm just gonna bang pepper just a little bit more. Okay, so next what we're gonna do is we're gonna put our seasonings on there. So you can do a bunch of different things. In this recipe, I have salt and pepper. You can leave it at that. You could add a little lemon pepper to it. You could add a little cayenne pepper if you wanna add a little bit of heat. Whatever seasonings you kind of like are fine. So I'm gonna transfer these over to this plate. And then we're gonna sprinkle that on there. Oops, that one kind of tore a little bit. That's all right. So we're gonna sprinkle it on and then I'm gonna pat it down. If you're trying to keep your blood pressure down, just be careful of how much salt you actually use in this recipe. This one doesn't use a lot of salt. You can always add flavor with the other herbs and spices. Okay, I'm just gonna pat that down. And then usually with chicken piccata, there's usually flour on the outside. Now if you want, you can skip that part in the recipe. It just helps kind of keep the moisture in there a little bit more. But next you're gonna put this in a Ziploc bag. Now if I was doing a bunch of these, I would use a bigger bag. Since I only have 2, I'm just gonna stick them in here. And then we're gonna close this and we're gonna shake it up. This is kind of a fun thing to do if you have kids at home too. They might like shaking the bag. Even put on some music, have a little bit of fun with it. Okay. All right, I'm going to take those out and shake off a little bit of the flour. We don't want a ton on there. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so there those are, and these are what I did ahead of time. So next what we're gonna do is we are gonna take these over to the stove and we are gonna cook them in a little bit of olive oil. I already have some in the pan. That's roughly like a tablespoon. You don't want too much or your stove is gonna spit all over the place. Plus we want to keep kind of calories and fat in check a little bit. So we're going to heat that up. While that's heating, I'm going to wash my hands, okay? So I'm just going to bring all this over here. I already have a sink with some soapy water in it, ready to go. Anytime you touch raw meat, poultry, fish, you want to make sure you're washing your hands, everybody, okay? All right, so we're going to get this going. Again, I have some olive oil here in the pan. We just need to let that heat up a little bit more. This is what I'm using today. It's California Olive Ranch extra virgin olive oil. This is a type of olive oil you can find in pretty much almost every grocery store here in the US. And I like using this one because it has a great flavor, and I know it has a high amount of the antioxidants. It's a really good quality extra virgin olive oil. So what we're going to do next, we are going to add that into the pan. So I'm going to use these so I don't get my hands all yucky again. All right. You want to try to make sure they're not touching each other as best you can. Now, if you're cooking a large amount of chicken breast, like if you're having company over and you want to make a lot of these, you might need to cook these in a couple different batches, okay? So we're going to let these kind of cook, again, because they're thinner. Since we pounded them down and they're all kind of even, they should cook a little bit faster. They should take about 2 to 3 minutes per side. And you want them to get just kind of like a nice golden sort of color. We want them cooking through most of the way. And this is what they look like when they're done. Okay, so I've cooked them both on each side. These have been sitting in the oven. So if you're making a big batch of them, you can keep them kind of warm in a little pan with a lid on it. And you could keep it in an oven roughly at about 225, just like a low temp oven, okay? So that's what those look like. If you don't have one of these kind of containers, you could also just put them on a plate and then put another plate on top of that. All right, so these are cooking kind of nicely now. That's great. I think we're going to let these cook. And then we will come back and I will show you what they look like when they're done. Okay, welcome back everybody. Our chicken is done cooking. Look how beautiful this is. Look at nice and golden on the outside. And again, the flour is going to help it retain some of its moisture. So, and what you could do if you're not sure if they're done or not, you could take a knife and a fork and you could cut a little slit in there. That's what I was doing when we were off camera, and checking to make sure they're done. So now we're going to put them in this container, and we want to keep them warm because next what we're going to do is we are going to make our sauce. Now you could eat the chicken just like this if you wanted to, but we're going to do a sauce just so it gives it a little bit more flavor. Let me get these into the oven just so they can stay nice and warm. All right, and what we're going to do next is we are going to add a little bit more olive oil to the pan because when we cook the chicken, a lot of it cooked out. So we're going to add that, and I'm going to have a wooden spoon here just to move everything around. You can see there'll be some nice little burnt pieces in here that'll add a little more flavor to the sauce once we get to that point. And what we're going to do next is we are going to take our garlic cloves and we are going to saute those. Now you don't want to cook garlic for too long, and you need to keep an eye on it. This is already a pretty hot pan. Woo! See it sizzling there. We don't want our olive to burn. We just want it to brown a little bit. So we're just going to move that around in the pan. And then we'll add a few other ingredients to it. Now, oh, that's not the garlic. That's that other chicken parts. Okay. If you don't have fresh garlic at home, like I have a garlic press, so I like to use fresh garlic whenever I can. You can also use the bottled minced garlic if you'd like, or you could add garlic powder later. So with our sauce, next we're gonna add in some chicken broth. This is low sodium chicken broth. Whoops. We're gonna add just a little bit of white wine, like a dry white wine. I'd recommend you use something like a Pinot Grigio. And then I squeezed lemon, so we're gonna add a little bit of fresh lemon juice. I'm not gonna use all of that in there. You don't want it too lemony. You want a little brightness to it, but you don't want it to be overly acidic either. So we're just gonna stir that a little bit. And then we'll add in our flour. Now this is gonna add some thickness to it. So our goal is to mix all this in, and then eventually I'm gonna turn the heat up a little bit, and we're going to, we're gonna reduce this. We want it to turn into kind of a thicker sort of sauce, okay? And I'm gonna break up some of these little flour pieces here too. We don't want giant chunks in our sauce. So break those up as best you can gently. As you can see, I wasn't being too careful. All right. So this is probably a good point to maybe talk about food label reading a little bit. This is one of the tips this week through the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics as part of National Nutrition Month. We want everyone to eat a wide variety of healthy foods. That's a huge goal. And then the other thing is to learn how to read food labels. So I don't know if we'll be able to get a big close-up on here, but if you're buying stuff in cans and packages, you definitely want to be looking at the food labels. And in the case of something like chicken broth, you want to look for something that has less sodium in it. Most regular chicken broths have, for every cup, it's going to be about 550 milligrams and higher. I've seen 850, I've seen sometimes over 1,000. So here's a great way where you can have flavor but not as much salt in there. So you'll want to look at the serving size that's on your label. So for here, the serving size for broth is a cup, and then all the numbers underneath here are for whatever that serving size is. So I did use a cup of it. And on here, you'll find sodium is right underneath cholesterol. I don't know if you can see that on there. And in this brand, it's 135 milligrams. If it's 135 milligrams or less, it's considered low sodium. They're allowed to put that on the package, which is what you see here. So this would be a great choice. So compare different brands, you know, so you can find things that have less sodium in them, and that helps keep your blood pressure down and keeps your heart really healthy. All right, I'm gonna turn the heat up here a little bit. You can see it's starting to bubble. I'm gonna turn it up almost to like medium high, because when it starts to boil and bubble, then it will start to reduce. Again, our goal is we want to get something kind of nice and thick to pour over our chicken. The other thing I was gonna mention is I used some white wine. As best you can, do not use cooking wine. It sounds like you should use it in cooking, but it's actually really high in sodium, and it tends to evaporate too quickly, which you don't want, and it's going to make it too salty. So I would recommend you just use regular dry white wine. A Pinot Grigio is an excellent choice. You could also use a Sauvignon Blanc. Stay away from Chardonnay unless it's an unoaked Chardonnay. That you could use, okay? All right, so you guys can see it bubbling up now. Now for this to reduce, you want to keep stirring it. And you can let it sit every so often, but you'll want to come back and stir. You don't want it to stick to the pan. If you leave it for too long, it's going to start sticking, okay? All right, so I think what we're going to do here is this is going to take, because I made a batch of this earlier and I've made it in the past. I know this is going to take anywhere from like 5 to 10 minutes, depends on the type of stove you have versus like a gas or an electric stove. So I think we'll stop here and we will come back when this sauce is done. All right, welcome back everyone. Our sauce is done. I think it's about to the thickness that I would like. So I'm gonna turn my heat down and stir it a little bit so you can kind of see. So if you give it a little bit of time it's gonna get a little bit thicker. Now at this point, what you can do, like in the recipe, it says you can add the capers and the parsley to it, but you don't have to do that. If you have some picky eaters in your family, you could keep both those things out and do this instead. So we're gonna move over here to the table. I have a plate already set up. So I made some pasta, some angel hair pasta. There's a piece of our cooked lemon chicken, or the chicken piccata on there. And then now we can scoop a little bit of sauce. So you can either take the chicken that was kept warm in the oven and you can add it to the sauce that way and add the capers and parsley, or you can assemble each of the plates separately. So this is what that would look like. So we're gonna put our chicken on the pasta and then we're gonna scoop some of the sauce on there. Okay, and then you can top it with a little bit of parsley if you'd like. Make it look nice and pretty. You could even dress up the plate if you have company over or you just want to make your meal a little more fancy. And then you can also decorate with some lemon wedges. So just cut those up ahead of time. Here are the capers. They're kind of just they're very salty, kind of briny, so they add just a punch of flavor, but you don't need a lot of them. Just so you know, you don't have to use them either. You can totally keep them out if you'd like, or if you prefer, you can use green olives and just chop those up and add them. It'll add a little bit of that saltiness or brininess as well. All right, so I hope you enjoyed watching me make this recipe. And just a reminder with our tips for National Nutrition Month in week 1, the goal is to eat a variety of healthy foods from each of the food groups. You can find this at myplate.gov, but we want to when we sit down to eat a meal, we want to have fruits and a fruit or vegetable, and then we want to have a grain and also a protein. So here we have 3 out of those groups. We've got our chicken with the protein, we've got our angel hair pasta with the grain, and then we also have our vegetable. You could do a salad. Other options for a well-balanced meal, if you didn't want to do the pasta, you could do roasted potatoes or a baked potato on the side. You could do some roasted butternut squash or spaghetti squash. And you could serve that all on the same plate with maybe some cooked broccoli or some other kind of steamed vegetable that you like. Our second tip, besides eating a variety of foods from each of the food groups, is to read those food labels. We talked about that earlier. And then the last tip is to incorporate cultural foods that you enjoy, your favorite things. And I will add a little thing to this. Maybe add some new recipes that you haven't tried before, like chicken piccata. So the recipe will be in our show notes if you'd like to make this at home. And thank you so much for watching, everyone. Bye.